And welcome to another episode of As the Steelers' Dramatic World Turns. That's almost what the show should be called, at least these days. This is another episode of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I am your host, Mike Asti. Again, as I'll remind you every single week, and we all do that, makes it easier for us to provide this content for you. Follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live. Most importantly, subscribe to us here on this YouTube channel, Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube. Follow me at Mike Asti 11. It's a shameless plug for me since this is my show. Make sure to check out all our websites and find all our shows again at the YouTube Pittsburgh Sports Live. Now, yep, the Steelers still haven't won in this young season, and yep, they're still pretty dramatic. Namely, and I touched on this in Steelers Monday, Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown is at the center of attention, and funny enough, when we recorded on Monday, when Chris Mueller and I recorded on Monday morning for Steelers Monday, we were touching on the Antonio Brown outburst during the game on the sideline with the offensive coordinator, in a game where the offense did produce and did score, even though they did not win, and mostly the defense collapsing in the beginning of that game leading to that. But the offense wasn't necessarily clicking on all cylinders throughout the game. And before it got going, he had an outburst on the sidelines with the offensive coordinator. That was kind of the attention of that program, because that program was recorded before even more drama erupted, and Antonio Brown made that outburst pale into comparison to what went on throughout Monday, going into Tuesday. Mike Tomlin's press conference was mostly about this. I was there. Tomlin, of course, didn't want to touch on it, but was forced to. And it was when Antonio Brown, many of you may have been on Twitter long enough to learn, do not feed in to trolling. Well, Antonio Brown did not adhere to this lesson. Sometimes I mess up too, but Antonio Brown with his following is obviously going to spark attention when he doesn't feed into when he feeds into the troll. And he fed into not only a troll, but he didn't really feed into a traditional troll. He fed into some critical comments, have it for you right here, from a former Steelers employee. So Ryan Scarpino, former Steelers employee in the public relations department, no longer with the team, threw up a critical tweet of Antonio Brown. AB needs to thank his lucky stars, because he was drafted by a team that had Ben, and Ben got AB paid. You know damn well he wouldn't put up these numbers for other teams. That's what Ryan said. AB quote tweet responded. He couldn't just let it go. Trade me. Let's find out. Now, on Ryan's comments, number one, there's been a myriad of elite receivers throughout history of the game. Just look at this recent Hall of Fame class with Randy Moss and Terrell Owens, whether or not he was at the ceremony. He was a Hall of Famer. Randy Moss, they were in the same class, and both of them had incredible numbers through most of their career without All-Pro or Hall of Fame quarterbacks to throw them the ball. Moss had Tom Brady briefly with the Patriots, and Terrell Owens had early days Steve Young, and then a little bit with McNabb and Tony Romo. But McNabb and Tony Romo are probably not Hall of Famers. Steve Young is, but it was only a year and a half or so in the beginning of his career. Moss had Brady, but many other years and many great numbers without Tom Brady as his quarterback. You can go to I can give you many other examples that are below their Hall of Fame levels in terms of, if you're an elite receiver, you don't necessarily need an all-pro quarterback to give you all-pro numbers. You may need that quarterback to help your team win. You may be helped by that quarterback for sure, and having that all-pro quarterback may certainly aid to your success and may certainly help things out and may certainly make it easier on you. So it's not to say that Ben hasn't made it easier on AB, and it's also not to say that AB hasn't helped Ben out and extend his career and help his numbers and help get him in the Hall of Fame, even though he's also had success without Antonio Brown. So I don't think it's fair to say either one of these two has made the other in terms of Ryan's tweet. And I think it's pretty universal to believe that Antonio Brown is an elite receiver. He's probably going to be a Hall of Fame receiver unless something catastrophic occurs. And I would imagine if he plays for another team next year, which isn't likely to occur, but just hypothetically to be funny here, if Antonio Brown is not on the Steelers next year, or the year after, or at some point in the future, I wouldn't imagine he would go from 1,200 plus yards per season, 1,000 plus yards per season at the minimum, 70 plus receptions at the minimum, to all of a sudden now 500 yards receiving, 600, 700 yards receiving, and dropping off to only 30 or 40 catches a year. I just can't imagine that. So Ryan was being critical of the team. He's a loud former employee of the team. There's been some national media that's alluded to maybe bad blood between Ryan and AB, or Ryan and the Steelers. I don't know Ryan's relationship with the Steelers. I've heard some grumblings as well being in media here in Pittsburgh, but I'm not going to touch on that because I don't have firsthand knowledge. I've not been able to speak to Ryan on this. So I'll leave that go. I'll leave that for the national media to sensationalize without probably actually even knowing what went on. But AB was just responding to criticism. And all criticism is valid, even though I don't agree necessarily with this criticism from Ryan that Ben has made AB. And AB got frustrated and said, trade me, let's find out. Now, again, if Antonio Brown was traded, I would imagine his numbers would still be great. Ben has certainly helped him, and maybe they wouldn't be as great as they would be with Ben if he did not have an all-pro quarterback or a future Hall of Famer like Ben Roethlisberger for so many years. But I still would imagine he'd be a great wide receiver, and he wouldn't totally fall off the map. I don't agree with that. I don't necessarily know if I even agree that this should be taken as literally as it's been. I don't feel, and it's been reported by Antonio Brown's agent and many others close to him, and even Mike Tomlin in his press conference, that Antonio Brown has not officially requested a trade. And one of my colleagues brought up, actually, Tim Benz brought up, that Martavis Bryant got into it on social media. Granted, that was criticism of Juju, but there were issues with him on social media last year, and then that eventually led to a literal request of a trade, and he then was traded in the offseason. Mike Tomlin, during those press conferences last year, I was there too, he didn't want to discuss it like he doesn't want to discuss this one, but it wasn't as much of a denial. He would let us know that there was a trade request put in, and we're going to have him on the team as long as we have him on the team, and while he's there, he's going to play well, and we're going to try to get him in the offense. We're not going to guarantee anything for him, but he did request to be traded. He is equivocally denying again that Antonio Brown has requested to be traded, so that may make this tweet not to be taken as literally as many are, but AB, of course, has to know that when you are going to quote tweet some criticism, you're allowed, but it's going to erupt and catch fire when you say, trade me, let's find out. Now, to the other end of this, which is off of kind of what this led to, it wasn't so much the outburst, but that's part of it on the sidelines on Sunday, because there's been several of those from Antonio Brown throughout the last few years, and you may get those from star diva wide receivers now and then. You certainly got those from Randy Moss and Terrell Owens that I mentioned at the top, who are kind of at the elite top class for diva wide receivers of the last 20, 30 years who end up in the Hall of Fame regardless of their quarterbacks. AB has had one of those Randy Moss, T.O. type outbursts pretty often the last few years, whether or not the offense is clicking for everybody else. If he's not getting involved, he's upset, and he's had those issues with Todd Haley and now having the issues with whoever is around him, whether it be the offensive coordinator or any of the offensive coaches or even any of his teammates. Haven't seen as much from Big Ben, but there's been subtle jabs. So nothing new there from AB to show frustration for the offense, or at least lack of involving him. And that wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world, because you're going to get that, even though it's an annoyance. But then you get this tweet, and then you get Monday, which Mike Tomlin was not as honest with, or at least he wasn't as forthcoming, wasn't as open to what really went on, even went as far to say that he wasn't sure he was going to devolve all the information and tell us all the information in terms of whether it was true or not. And that means whether Antonio Brown's absence from Monday was excused or not excused. Antonio Brown, the day after the outburst, around the same time you're seeing this tweet and seeing the trade me, let's find out, he's gone from the Steelers facility. He's not there. MIA in action, doesn't show up for work. And his agent has said that it was a personal reason. So I'm going to preface this by saying that if it was a personal reason, and sometimes these things do come out later, and even if the team doesn't want to release it, sometimes that is legitimate. If it was a personal reason, If somebody passed away, if there was some emergency, if there was some family crisis, if there was somebody ill, if there was some scare of some kind, if maybe his house was broken into, if it was a legitimate personal reason, even if the family dog needed to go to the vet, maybe then, because we all love our dogs. If there was some legitimate personal reason and the Steelers excused it, whether they normally would or not, but maybe they just want him out of there because of all the drama that's erupting around him. But regardless, if it was a legitimate excused absence off a personal reason, as his agent has said and has told the media, then okay. All right. If not, if it's either his agent is saying that to cover something up, if Antonio Brown just didn't want to show up for work, if even the Steelers told him just don't show up because we don't want Mike Asti and the rest of the Pittsburgh media to hound us about this and it's more of a cover-up, then that's where a lot of us are going to have problems, and that's where I have a problem with it. Because I get the outbursts are going to occur, but you reply to a troll, you feed into a troll or even criticism from a former employee, and you say, trade me, let's find out on criticism, and then you don't show up, so you're not there. Nobody answers anything about it. Mike Tomlin won't talk about it. He won't tell us whether it's excused or not. So it very well could be that you just didn't want to show up for work. You're going to open yourself up to criticism. And we might be wrong in some of the criticism we levy, but this is the same guy in Antonio Brown who in the offseason showed up to training camp in a helicopter. That's cool. That's fun. Nobody has issues with that, at least. But once he does that, he then holds court with the media and says he's upset about the narrative, that we make things up, that we inflame the fire, that if it wasn't for us, there would be no attention paid to him, that he doesn't want all this attention, that we're obsessed with him. And that's just paraphrasing where he was going with all of that. But that's all ridiculous because you're going to bring the attention on yourself when you show up in a helicopter. And that's fun, jovial attention, sure. But then when you say, trade me, let's find out, when you're replying to criticism from a former employee who may or may not have bad blood with you, when you don't show up for work, when that may or may not be excused, but say it wasn't excused and you don't show up, and when you couple that with an outburst on the sideline when the offense does perform and doesn't lose the game because of the offense, even though your team loses, and that precedes all of that drama, in addition to all the drama surrounding teammates of yours and the team not winning, that's obviously going to bring some attention in your direction, and that's all self-imposed attention. It's nobody else's fault. It's self-imposed attention. And also, you're doing it in a year. Now, Antonio Brown is an elite, all-pro wide receiver for sure. He's going to the Hall of Fame someday. Nobody's going to give up on him, and he'll get some job in the NFL if it's not with the Steelers in the future. But it isn't. If you look at his numbers here so far this year, he has 1 touchdown. What was that, 160 yards, 18 catches, struggled mightily so early on, at least, in that Kansas City game. He's still getting targets, but he's not exactly having the best of years. The team has 1 tie, 1 loss. He's flipping out on the sidelines. He doesn't show up for work. He's tweeting back with a former employee saying, trade me, even though maybe not to be taken as literally. And this is all after in the offseason when he says, don't talk about me as much. Your narratives are wrong. You're so obsessed with me. Come on. Not to steal a page from the national media again, but come on, man. Trade me, let's find out. The outburst, not showing up, everybody kind of pussyfooting around the subject. You don't want anyone to talk about you, say the narratives are wrong, and it's not valid. And you're not really producing to the level that you say you should, and many of his teammates aren't either. This team hasn't won, but come on, man. That is where it gets a little too crazy. And I also now want to get to what Tomlin had to say on this. I was at the press conference. Tomlin was asked about this, of course. We kind of slowly worked our way into it. Talked about the game first, but then he was asked about it. Gave the same old answer he normally does, but eventually had to open up a little bit more because, according to Antonio Brown, we inflame the fire and won't let things go.
In multiple cities, we've seen him. Some extensively in Cincinnati and Buffalo. He's a smart guy, Ivy League educated. He's always made good decisions. That's why he's been able to sustain himself and play for the length of time that he's played. He's playing really well right now in the environment that he's playing in. He's got some nice weapons. Starts with Mike Evans, first rounder, big ex-receiver type, makes good combat catches. physical in the run game. He's got a very complete game. Physicality is an element of his play. He's big, but he also plays big. Deshaun Jackson can take the top off. He's always been a big play guy, man. He's probably 10 years in or so now. This guy has been at the forefront of that area with guys like Mike Wallace and others, man, since he's been in the league. He's always capable of doing that. They got a quality tight end they drafted out of Alabama, and O.J. Howard, who's produced some splash. He's big play capable.
So Tomlin, again, doesn't like to touch on social media. No surprise there. Didn't want to really, obviously, bury Antonio Brown in any way, kind of shying away from being too critical, basically telling us he's going to speak to him privately, which I would imagine has already occurred here and happened soon after that press conference, according to what Mike Tomlin was telling us. Going to have a sidebar, one-on-one. He's had to have too many of these talks in recent years, but it's another one of those private conversations, and this even goes stemming way back to the playoff game where Antonio Brown was doing a Facebook Live, and Tomlin said, no discipline, but we're going to have the one-on-one private conversation. Antonio Brown since has gotten paid. You're seeing maybe a little bit of him kind of unraveling in terms of dealing with the media based on what he said in the offseason about not liking the narratives and we're too obsessed with him. You're seeing the trade me, let's find out tweet. You're seeing the outburst on the sideline, which that's not nothing new, but still you don't love to see it. Then you're seeing him not show up for work, a la Martavis Bryant last season during his social media drama. So this is kind of par for the course with the Steelers. Social media drama, outbursts on the sidelines, some drama erupting around you, the team not winning, you don't show up for work, or they tell you not to come in. Tomlin doesn't want to discuss it. He'll have the private meeting, doesn't like to go into social media, and then here we are. And that led to Martavis Bryant being traded, and obviously he's not close to the elite player that Antonio Brown is, or at least hasn't produced to that level. Martavis Bryant wasn't even able to make the Oakland Raiders. I mean, this is a guy that's not close to Antonio Brown's level. So I understand allowing more rope with Antonio Brown. Jimmy Johnson, two-time Super Bowl winning coach with the Dallas Cowboys back in the early 90s. Him and Jerry Jones had that relationship that was a bit rocky, but he would always say, and I heard him say in different documentaries about that era of the Cowboys, that, hey, it's not as much as every other workplace in the world. You might treat, and even some of them, you might treat different guys differently. You're going to treat a star player, a Troy Aikman, and the last guy on the roster differently. That's just how it is, and that's just how he did it, and obviously had success doing that. If last guy on the roster is sleeping through a meeting, he's going to make an example out of him, whereas if Troy Aikman sleeping through a meeting, he would tell him and whisper in his ears, hey, Troy, wake up, or maybe even put a pillow in front of him. And that was successful at the time. But And they were dealing with a lot of controversy there. But the difference is they won championships during all that controversy, so you can kind of get away with that. Mike Tomlin's won a championship. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been to another one. So it's not to say he hasn't had success, but there hasn't been a championship won with Antonio Brown. There hasn't been a championship won with Le'Veon Bell. There hasn't been a championship won with these star players that were on the offensive line recently. There hasn't been a championship won since you've had these triplets of Big Ben, Antonio Brown, and Le'Veon Bell. Those three have not won a championship together. And I think part of the criticism that comes up when you go towards Mike Tomlin dealing with this, obviously you're not going to be able to bench a guy when you haven't won. You're facing a high-powered offense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who are playing really, really well with Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Conor McGregor of the NFL and the Buccaneers. Monday Night Football. But at the same time, this isn't just an Antonio Brown isolated problem. That might be the micro of everything, but there's a macro of Le'Veon Bell's involvement, and I know that's more contract and guaranteed money, and I've touched on that repeatedly here and at other outlets, so go find this recent Steelers Monday or the last couple weeks' Mic Drop episodes to get my full take on Le'Veon Bell. But there is the Le'Veon Bell drama. There's been drama with Big Ben in the media. There's been obviously drama with Antonio Brown now. There's been drama with Antonio Brown in the past. There's been Martavis Bryant. There's been Mike Wallace. There has been a list of players that there has been drama involved with, and I can go on, and we can do an hour-and-a-half show just on the Steelers drama in the last 5+ years. That's during the time they've had these triplets. That's during the time they've had even other offensive weapons. They've had even a superstar kicker who's not performing right now. They've had stars across the board. During that time, they haven't really been able to beat the Patriots. The Patriots have repeatedly appeared in the Super Bowl. They've won a championship during that time. They haven't been able to have the success that roster would dictate, because that roster, the Steelers roster the last 5+ years, is inarguably the most talented in the NFL. The results haven't been the best in the NFL. They haven't won a championship or a Super Bowl during that time frame, haven't even been in one during that time frame. But the most talented by far. On paper, you'd rather have the Steelers roster in a video game than, say, the New England Patriots roster, but the Patriots have been wildly more successful. And yes, they take chances and trade for a guy like Josh Gordon, bring in an Ocho Cinco, bring in a Randy Moss. They take chances on guys that others maybe would not want to take those chances on, and they can and get away with it sometimes because they've won so much. But they also don't put up with any crap, for lack of a better description. And they don't force things on. Ocho Cinco was there, wasn't learning the offense. They didn't really play him. They went to Super Bowl that year. He bought the team some iPads as a gift, but I think, what was it, 11 catches, 20-some catches at the most? Used to know those numbers exactly. I think it was maybe 22 catches, 200 and some yards. It was a nothing season. It was a throwaway year, one of the worst years of Ocho Cinco's career for a borderline Hall of Famer. And that was the year he was with Tom Brady and the Patriots, that he thought he was going to be going to heaven and increasing himself to get into Canton. That year might have led to what doesn't get him there, even though the team won. They didn't put up the second the Aaron Hernandez thing erupted. He was gone that second, and that's a little bit more serious, obviously. But Randy Moss, even after 2.5 years of record-setting performances, undefeated regular season, almost winning a Super Bowl with Randy Moss, the second he started acting up, the second they believed they weren't going to have him come back, the second money was erupted, the second he was even the slightest malcontent in that facility, gone, traded immediately, not putting up with much. And Moss didn't want to go. Trust me, anybody will tell you that Moss did not want to leave there. If Josh Gordon acts up and he brings the same thing he brought to Cleveland, no way are they going to keep putting up with it. Not at all. So the sense is, and you just look at what happened in the Super Bowl this past year. He had a player that there was some controversy with benching him in the secondary. They got lit up. They certainly could have used to have him. He was a great part of the defense through most of the year, one of the better players, even though not as much in the playoffs. And there were rumors that eventually came out that he missed some team meetings, that he was late for different things during that week. And regardless of what was true and what wasn't, Bill Belichick just wasn't putting up with it. Gone. You're not playing. And then gone in the offseason. Arguably risked a championship to send a message. So if this situation was on the New England Patriots, I almost would guarantee Antonio Brown would at least be sitting out the first half of that Monday Night Football game, if not missing it. At the very least, he'd be sterner to the media, and he'd send a stronger message if he wasn't actually going to suspend the player. It'd be more than just, we're not going to talk about it and we're going to sit him down privately. I don't even know if he'd be welcoming Le'Veon Bell back to the team if he's missing games due to wanting more guaranteed money. Bill Belichick doesn't put up with much of that. I don't think in Week 11 Bill Belichick would be too thrilled to welcome Le'Veon Bell back if that's when he shows up into the fold and have the final of the season with Le'Veon Bell and success there, knowing he's going to leave at the end of the season. I don't know if that would happen. I could very easily see Bill Belichick trading him at some point before that, or just simply sitting him down and saying a message that, hey, you're back now to get your free agent year, but you're not going to play. He'd find somebody else. It's a plug-and-play position for Bill Belichick at the running back position. He's done that for years. Kind of had that with Corey Dillon. Brought him in, star player, finally got a star there at the back position. A little bit of trouble. Got somebody else. Gave the ball back to Kevin Falk at the time. So if this was the Patriots and Bill Belichick, they would not be putting up with this at all from any of these star players around the Steelers. And not everybody's going to live up and do the exact same thing as Bill Belichick and the Patriots. And you can run things looser and have players have a little bit more fun and not hate it as much and still win. They haven't won every championship in the NFL, of course, over the last 15 years. Granted, they've won the most. And the Philadelphia Eagles beat them in the Super Bowl, and they have more of a loose environment, have more fun, and are more vocal on social media, going to former Patriot Chris Long, just for example, this past year. But the Steelers haven't won the championship. They haven't won with Mike Tomlin having these three triplets. He's won, but once you've had Big Ben, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown, the three of them together, they haven't won. So that's certainly disappointing. Everybody could agree that's a lack of success based on your expectations with having the most talented roster in the league. And I'm not one calling for Mike Tomlin's firing by any means. He's still one of the most successful coaches in the NFL, won the most games he's had in a regular season last year, so that was improvement. Lost in the division round of the playoffs last year at Jacksonville. That was an upset at home. I was there in the press box. We were kind of shocked how that game unraveled. But also that was partly because of the defense, certainly a defensive collapse there. But even decisions to fire Todd Haley and not fire Butler, give Butler more rope despite the defense still not improving this year. A decision on that this year, if they would miss the playoffs and the defense doesn't improve, that would be interesting. I'd imagine Butler would have to go then, with Tomlin then being on the hot seat, because you don't want too many of these missed playoff years. And we all know, too, for the people that bring up Bill Cowher wouldn't put up with this, maybe he wouldn't put up with some of these disciplines, but it's a different era in the NFL, and he had several years in a row where he missed the playoffs. So it wasn't as if Bill Cowher every single year was postseason, every single year was a championship. He won one championship towards the end, was in one in the beginning, lost that Super Bowl, numerous AFC Championship game losses, many disappointments. If Twitter was around during AFC Championship game losses in the 90s, I'm sure they would have called for his head mightily during that time. And some of my veteran colleagues and elder colleagues in the media were then when I was a kid and I was hearing them, but it wasn't as much around the fan base. And now this fan base is calling, oh, if Cowher was here, he would change things. Look at the chin. We need that discipline again. We need Cowher back. There's nothing saying Cowher could deal with these players in today's NFL. It's totally different. He's not done it. And there has been missed opportunities at postseason appearances. There has been missed opportunities with talented rosters that didn't win enough. There has been disappointing years and underachieving, arguably, years under the Bill Cowher era as well. So it wasn't this pristine era, a Bill Belichick-like era. It was not that at all that people cry for Bill Cowher now during this Tomlin fiasco. I will say, though, Tomlin needs to absolutely be stricter. He needs to send a stronger message to the media. He needs to outlaw some policy against players being on social media during the season or what they say on social media during the season. That was also brought up during the press conference. If he doesn't like social media and Ben's not on it and says he doesn't watch it and he doesn't pay close enough attention to Twitter, then maybe Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell can't be tweeting and dropping albums or saying, trade me, let's find out, every other day during the season on Twitter. Maybe that's a policy he implements. Doesn't suspend people during games and cost the team and lose games they need to win. But maybe he implements a no Twitter policy during the regular season and playoffs. Wouldn't be ridiculous. Wouldn't be the first franchise to do it. LeBron James implemented his own during his career in the NBA. So that goes on. That wouldn't necessarily be asinine and ridiculous. Needs to be stricter for sure and will be on the hot seat if they miss the playoffs. But right now is not as if Tomlin's job right now is in jeopardy. There's been enough success there that, trust me, and this also was said on a couple Steelers Mondays ago by Chase Williams of WPXI. Look at what's going on with Jason Garrett in Dallas. Look at what went on with New York and the Giants after getting rid of Tom Coughlin. There have been several examples of marquee franchises that were used to winning. They get a guy that doesn't have success, that underachieves with talent. They keep him around for years and years and years, and then it's just continuous mediocrity. While Mike Tomlin has some problems with some players and drama and hasn't won a championship with these three, even though he's won by himself, he's had way more success than Jason Garrett's of the world and a lot of those guys who are in those marquee situations that also keep getting chances. He's had tons of success. That if you look on the resume, Bill Belichick and then to Mike Tomlin's right after him in terms of career success, and Tomlin probably going to the Hall of Fame someday based on what he's done in the NFL from being an assistant under Tony Dungy, who he'll be playing his former team and he'll be getting a tribute, and he talked about that too with us at the press conference on Monday. But it doesn't necessarily need to be Mike Tomlin being fired. You don't need to be calling for Bill Cowher either. That's a little crazy. He will be on the hot seat if this isn't figured out. He should be stricter, and AB is not going to sit out Monday Night Football when they haven't won a game. That's just not going to happen, so there's really no need to go into it too much. Now, I'm going to briefly preview the Bucs game, or at least play what Tomlin said about Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Bucs offense, the whole situation with Tony Dungy being honored during that game at halftime, what he meant to him. I mean, it's scary, folks. The Steelers haven't won a game. They had a tie, they have a loss, and look what they have to deal with. Look at that. It's the NFL's Conor McGregor. NFL's Conor McGregor right there. Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's bringing that offense. He's bringing that beard. He's bringing that swag. He's bringing that chest hair, that chain, that tracksuit, and those sunglasses, all with him to Monday Night Football. and facing off against a winless Steelers team. It's going to be something. Going to be something, to say the least. Mike Tomlin now on Ryan Fitzpatrick, that Buccaneers offense. Veteran quarterback, not too surprised, while many nationally are shocked at the success Ryan Fitzpatrick is having early in the season.
Social media like things, I'll address that and address that very directly with him. But I'll leave that between he and I. I'm not going to utilize this forum to address such things. I just don't believe it's appropriate. I think that this forum is a very professional one. We got a lot of football things to talk about. You know, performance, personnel, opportunities, challenges that the game of football presents. I always want to take that road when I'm standing in front of this podium representing this league. That's just how I choose to approach it.
There it is. Mike Tomlin not shocked. Again, this is Pittsburgh Live. Mic drop here, Pittsburgh Live. See me there with the nameplate there and the bottom scroll. Follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live. Follow us on our YouTube channel and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel to make all these radio golden or visually golden broadcasts possible. There's us there on the YouTube, Pittsburgh Sports Live on YouTube. PGH Sports Live on Twitter. Find myself at Mike Asti 11 on Twitter. It's going to be rough, though. Going to be tough sledding. Steelers defense going to need to improve mightily, certainly in the secondary. Nothing close to replacing Ryan Shazier out there. Buccaneers team is mostly a passing team, so that might be able to alleviate some things since they have a one-dimensional type of team, but the run has set up the pass very successfully so far. And Tomlin did compare it to Drew Brees and what the Saints do for the last few years, where the run sets up the pass, and Ryan Fitzpatrick is slinging it around, so he has the confidence, and the Steelers defense is going to be tested again. So the focus is not going to be as much of trying to score with Antonio Brown, although it will be there. But they are able to get him the ball and give him targets. He needs to catch them. But there shouldn't be as much drama there because the focus really is going to be on the defense and how the defense can deal with Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Buccaneers offense. Now, before I close things out, not just a Steelers show, even though that's obviously going to be most of the attention during Steelers season. We have Dan Kongursky doing a lot with the Penguins. I'm going to touch on them when it's big news, but he's going to give you the day-to-day on the Penguins and mostly give you that content in his show, on the Dan Kongursky Show. Alan Saunders bringing you the coverage of Pitt, bringing you the coverage of most of football, so we'll touch on some high school as well for his Football Friday program, and Mike Vakovican giving you the All-Pitt program with the Pittsburgh Sports Now coverage of the University of Pittsburgh and what they're doing now in their football season off of a win against Georgia Tech, so it's turning things around after the Penn State loss. I'm going to try to give them mostly respect, to have them touch on it mainly. I will dab if need be. I'm versatile enough. I can talk about everything. I have done so in my career and covered it all. So anything is pertinent to this show, any major thing develops, I will get it in here. But mostly I'll give you the Steelers coverage since they're not doing it. And it's critical here, obviously very, very important. It's still a Steelers town. It's going to be the headlines. When there's drama around the Steelers, almost when they're losing in this drama, it's almost more fun and semi-better for business for us here at Pittsburgh Sports Live and throughout Pittsburgh sports media. But I'm also going to give some necessary fodder when it's needed, and I'm going to close this show with some Pittsburgh Pirate talk. And it's just simply that last night I was staying up and watching an extra inning game. They did win it in extra innings, ended up getting a walk-off victory in extra innings over the Kansas City Royals. And that win, you'll see it here, that win gave them 76 wins on the season, 2 games above 500. And, of course, they're not going to make the playoffs. Of course, they're fourth in the division, as you see, well behind Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Louis, and ahead of Cincinnati, although everybody is. So it's not going to be a playoff year for the Pirates, but this is interesting to me, and I feel it needed to be brought up. In the offseason, after the Kutch trade, after the Garrett Cole trade especially, everybody in media, for the most part, was very down on the Pirates, and they deserve the criticism. I was right there. I'm not going to step away. I was down on the Pirates. I didn't think they'd win more than 77, 78 games at the most. I thought, okay, they'd probably be below 500. It's going to be a missed playoff year. once again, they're doing another rebuild, and I knew the McCutchen thing was going to happen, and he wasn't going to stay long term. But why not wait another year with Garrett Cole and tried to win more? And they didn't fulfill the window they had in those 3 years from 13 to 15, and they could have brought in more, and they didn't fully want to spend and all of that. I was right there with everybody in Pittsburgh media, and even the fans who were fully revolting. You look at the attendance throughout the year; it's been horrible. To be honest and be blunt, it's been way worse than it's been in even the last few years when they weren't having success of that 3-year window, and that 3-year window was incredible, of course. But the attendance this year was horrendous. I would drive past to live around the area and see nobody in the stadium and think Pirates aren't playing. Then all of a sudden, the Pirates are actually playing. They just have what appears to be 20 people in the stands, and all the social media accounts of at empty pictures and all those accounts making fun of the attendance. They were running full steam this year for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I even sent them some. And I wasn't around the team as much this past year as I was the year before. Wasn't covering them as much full time this year as I was the year before when I was doing that for the Trib. But still, the Pirates' attendance was awful. You don't got to be there every day to know that. So there was a revolt from the fans. There was heavy criticism from the media. And again, I could argue that still maybe Garrett Cole could have stayed here another year. He's having success with Houston. And again, I could argue that regardless of those two moves, and McCutchen hasn't had success with the Giants, eventually traded to New York. And that trade we knew was going to happen probably, or at least he was going to be exiting at some point here in the near future. That was discussed for 2 years here in Pittsburgh. Even if he played up to the MVP level, then he would have wanted more money. It just seemed like the end of the road was near for McCutchen. But it was mostly during that window that there has been times for the Pirates, of course, I'm right there with you, that they didn't really seize the day. That's the phrase. They had the window, and they didn't seize the day. Now, they didn't want to do a Florida Marlins thing where you win a World Series or you win 2 World Series, and that's the only 2 playoff appearances you have in a 15 or 20-year period. They wanted consistent success, and they had 3 straight postseason appearances. They didn't win much in the playoffs. They had the one wild card win, lose in the division round. They didn't win the other wild card games. But you also don't want a situation where you're never really going for it, or especially more money can be spent, because that exists too, and that's a lot of the criticism. The Kansas City Royals, when they went to back-to-back World Series and won a championship, they were a small market like Pittsburgh for years. They worked it up through the farm system like the Pirates had to do. They sprinkled some other minor trades in like the Pirates had to do. But then all of a sudden, once they saw they could win a pennant, or once they won that first pennant, they wanted that championship, they would bring in a guy like James Shields, who maybe didn't give them the bang on the delivery. I've called him overrated in the past, but they overspent arguably for him to get maybe some critical wins, and just the effort of really putting in the spending and beefing up their payroll when they wanted to win a championship. Look what's happening with the Cleveland Indians. Now, they're not a small market like Pittsburgh necessarily, but it's a similar city, a similar market size in terms of TV market. And going back to the 90s till now, and its different management structures, with the Pirates going through this era, of course. But when they had a chance, when they had a window, it wasn't every year, they would truly go for it. They go and lose a World Series in 7 games in a heartbreaker, and they would sign somebody in the offseason for a lot of money to bring in and add to that offense that wasn't even necessary when they brought in Encarnacion. When you look at Milwaukee, when they brought in CeCe Sabathia, they really wanted to go for it that year. They didn't win a championship, but they showed we're going to go for it by bringing a splash ace type of pitcher who's eventually going to go to the Hall of Fame. Now, sometimes it hasn't worked for teams. The Orioles have tried to do it and it hasn't worked, but that's the point. The Pirates haven't really been interested in beefing up the payroll, and when they're able to win or hold water with who's on the team, they don't truly go for it to get that championship, even if that would mean losing in later years. And the fans revolted, and they didn't go. But what needs to be brought up here is, despite the fan revolt, despite all the criticism, the fans and a lot of those critics in media, myself included, were kind of wrong. Because, yes, they didn't go for it in past years, and yes, they made trades, but they weren't big trades. They didn't really help the team. Yes, they maybe could have spent more, regardless of who they brought in and who didn't. Maybe you want more spending during that window to really get a championship out of it. And whether it's their fault or not, regardless, they haven't been able to get a pennant or a championship out of their windows when they've had them, and they're one of only a few franchises, with Seattle and a couple others, that has not at least won a pennant and appeared in a World Series in the last 30 years. most look around the line, at least got to a World Series. Most of them have got to a World Series. There have been some that have not, but those have had more NLCS or ALCSs in that time period as well. The Pirates haven't even got that far since 92. Most other franchises, and that includes Seattle and Milwaukee, who haven't won a pennant, they've been to the ALCS, NLCS during that time repeatedly. The Pirates have not. So that's going to be a problem, and that's where the fan base is going to stick to. But we're in the here and now, and the here and now isn't about that 3-year window that's gone now. Kutch and Cole, they weren't going to be there long term anyway. I would have rather seen Cole stay, but say Cole was still there. How much would that really change things? Because the interesting thing, part of this is the Pirates are now still fighting for a winning record. It actually would be their 4th winningest record in that 25-plus year period. That's what's amazing. They could actually still end up with a winning record that is still in their top 5 in that 25, 30-year period, going off of also that 3-year window. Won't be a playoff appearance. And if they had Cole, maybe they would. They win 3 or 4 more games. What really would that have done? I want the team. They need to. They need to really seize the day when they can, when they have a window. That's not really right now. Maybe that'll be next year or the year after. Maybe then you need to seize the day, and then you need to bring somebody in. They did it this year with Chris Archer. That was kind of a move you would have liked to have seen a couple years ago or in that window. That Chris Archer move then maybe could have led to winning a pennant or a championship. Now it was almost immaterial. But maybe it's helped, and he's been up and down, but maybe it's helped boost them into at least being over 500. And that's the question for you to soak in as I close things out. Do you care the Pirates are above 500? Are going to maybe finish with a winning record this year, that are fighting for a winning record? I know you're dealing with the Steelers drama and the opening of another Penguin season, but do you care about that? Is that a matter to you? If that happens, does that really prove all of us wrong, being too harsh on the criticism? I say it kind of does there. I don't know how much I do really care, though, to be honest. That's not where my main coverage is or my attention, to be honest with you. Probably most of the fans are like me. And what will that really mean if they finish above 500 and have a winning record in the midst of nobody going to games and so much heavy criticism on their offseason? What will that mean for this coming offseason with money still left on the books? Certainly more money that can be spent. If they get above 500, they have Archer maybe for a full year. He's still locked up. Then what do? Do you bring somebody else and you try to do something to this team that maybe even takes it to a next level and gets into the playoffs? If not, does that bring criticism because you got above 500 but then did nothing again? All those questions will be answered, and the Pirates will keep on fighting to be above 500 and have that winning record. It'll be interesting. I might watch more games now just to see what happens. It's going to be curious, but I think the insane fire of criticism that people thought they were going to be the worst in baseball or win 70 games and nobody's going to games, that's a bit overblown, clearly. They've been better than what the expectations were, even though the expectations are still not going to lead them to the playoffs and more, which eventually is where you want to get, and they weren't able to seize the day when they could, so you're fighting uphill. Once again, check out our YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Pittsburgh Sports Live there on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live. Follow myself at Mike Asti 11. This has been another golden quality edition of Mike Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live as I conquered sports radio one day at a time.